Started. So today's lesson, I struggled with this a lot, but what I decided to do is just kind of shift, because if you look at what I was going to do, it was like, the atheist, just address the atheistic thought in the world today. I mean, it's in the schools. I mean, probably wouldn't worry about it, but this is what our children are being indoctrinated with, subtly. It's this atheistic evolutionary thought, naturalist, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, I guess I just want to, I shifted more away from addressing that and just going with scriptures, looking at the scientific laws and then looking at what scriptures that kind of go along with these scientific laws, if that makes sense.
Now we're not.
Nah.
I'll do it for you.
All right. First law of thermodynamics. Okay. Energy. Okay. First of all, we know from Einstein that energy. It should have been energy slash mass, not energy slash energy. Energy slash mass cannot be created or destroyed. I mean, you can destroy at mass, but it turns into energy. You can destroy energy, but it turns into mass. There's only so much of that substance in existence. This next slide. This is what Genesis 2:2-3 says. By the seventh day, God completed his work from which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because he rested from all his work he had created and made. So that's very consistent with the first law of thermodynamics. Is once the creation was in place, there's no more creation. God's not adding or taking away from his creation, and that's what we see. That's what we see in nature is energy and or mass is not being created or destroyed. Next slide. Okay. Yes, creation is complete. No new energy or matter is being created since. This mirrors the first law. Next slide. Hebrews 1:3. And he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the word of his power. When he had made purifications for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. So God is actively sustaining his creation. Energy is not lost, but upheld by his ongoing form. Next slide. Colossians 1:16 and 17. For by him all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. So it just struck me that visible and invisible. So everything, the things you see, the things you can't see. Christ is the unifying force behind creation's integrity, implying a closed, sustained system. Isaiah 40:26. Raise your eyes on high and see who has created these stars. The one who brings out their multitude by number. He calls them by name because of his greatness, of his might, and the strength of his power. Not one of them is missing. God created and maintains the vast, ordered universe without loss, paralleling the first law. Nehemiah 9:6. You alone are the Lord. You have made the heavens with all their lights, the earth and everything that is in it, the seas and everything that is in them. You give life to all of them, and the heavenly lights bow down before you. So that's the same. It's one-time creation. So now we have the second thought through dynamics. This is very, in my life, was very key because, I guess all through high school, I really wasn't a believer. I mean, I grew up in the Methodist church, but, didn't attend, didn't really believe. And then I remember sitting in a physics class my freshman year, and the physics teacher talked about the second law of thermodynamics, and I'm like, well, it kind of proves that, there was a beginning. The idea that, at that time, the idea was that, for atheistic thought was that, the world's just always been here. Well, you look at second law of thermodynamics, that can't be true. That just absolutely cannot be true. Because systems naturally move from order to disorder. There had to be a beginning. Somebody had to wind the clock of the universe, right? How do atheists get around this? One way is, they start time at 1 second after, they put, I don't know if they call it creation, but I guess 1 second after the world started to be created, that's when the laws went into effect. Or, 1 millisecond after, well, there's a lot of problems with that, right? If you're going to be an atheist, really when it comes down to it, the atheists also have to have a creator, right? Whether the universe creates itself or something, but they still have to have, I guess I'll compare it to when I was growing up. We're talking about where'd God come from, and they used to just say, and her only answer was, God, God always was, right? God always was. I think there's a better answer than that now. But it just is, God just is. Well, atheists have the same problem. At some point, you pin them down and you get to a point and they say, it just is. So they really what they don't have is an adequate explanation, right? God is an adequate just is. There's the world, God is an adequate cause of the universe. It's probably the biggest thing, if you look at the comparison. God is an adequate cause of the universe. All these theories, you add them up, they're just swimming and diving and, dodging. But at the end of the day, it's just not adequate. Their cause for the creation of the world is just not adequate. If you're honest about it, I guess one thing is, well, I guess one dodge is, they say, they'll say, you'll ask them, oh, well, not you ask me, you look and see that, like some, how could something like a heart develop? And they say, oh, it inherited it. No, that's not inadequate. That just begs the question, right? Or it's totally inadequate. And if you look at all their answers, they're all inadequate. But God is adequate. The second law of thermodynamics teaches us that systems tend to move from order to disorder, and energy naturally disperses unless sustained. The Bible frequently echoes this reality in descriptions of creation's groaning, aging, decay, and need for divine restoration. So this is kind of a interesting concept, is that things just tend to run down. The universe is running down. You think about, anything you do, there's less usable energy than there was the moment before you did it, whatever happens. Now on Earth, that's a little, and that's within a closed system. Now the sun kind of, while we're on Earth, the sun kind of makes up for some of that. The sun, gives us light and life. It's the energy source that kind of makes up for this gradual decline. But even the sun is going to, burn out someday. But there is, things rust, things wear out, that type of thing. Romans 8:20-21. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope, that the creation itself also will be set free from its slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God. It's just winding down. The whole creation is just winding down. Psalm 102:25-26. In the time of old you founded the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. Even they will perish, but you endure. All of them will wear out like a garment, like clothing. You will change them, and they will pass away. And it's the universe deteriorates, going along with entropy. Matthew 6:19. Do not store yourselves treasures in earth where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. Kind of shows us the general, and we all see it every day, right? You build a house, it wears out, right? You get a car, it wears out. James 5:2-3. Your riches have rotted, and your garments have become moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will serve as testimony against you, and will consume your flesh like fire. In the last days that you have stored up treasure, wealth itself corrodes. Physical decay is inescapable. And put in this one, I don't know if it's the best one or the worst one, but anyway, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no longer any death, there will be no longer any mourning or crying, and first things passed away, and he who sits on the throne. Behold, I am making all things new. And he said, write, for these words are faithful and true. You think about life's probably the one. Everybody gets old, right? If you're talking about rust and decay.
Roger, it's like, our bodies prove this because, when we're babies, we start out, our blood vessels are all nice and clear, our joints feel great. The older we get, our joints get more arthritis, our arteries start to clog up, and
That's me.
you know that God's going to provide us with, you know, our bodies are physical, but heaven's everlasting.
Absolutely. Yeah, and this only exists because, you know, you think, oh, is this, you know, this is just one of the rules that God put in place, is that things decline. Of course, in the, you know, the Garden of Eden, they could eat of the tree, you know, they could eat of the tree and live forever, but, you know, without that, you know, everybody decays. Yeah, the older I get, I see that more and more. Just, you heal slower. Oh my goodness. The law of biogenesis, another law of, and when I go through this, I'm trying to mention what kind of law is it. This is a law of biogenesis. And this is a very interesting law. Life only comes from life. We have never observed life coming from non-life in any experiment. Evolution demands at some point life came from non-living chemicals, a direct contradiction of this law. So, I think this was about 1880 that Louis Pasteur came up with this. He discovered this. Before, it was just assumed that spontaneous generation just occurred. So in that, you know, just life, you know, like small forms of life would just pop out of nowhere because they seem to, right? I mean, something dies and you get maggots on it and all that kind of thing. You know, there's, you know, life does seem to just come from nowhere. But it doesn't. It all comes from life. But anyway, this is about 1880, and then the early 1800s is when Darwin came up with his theory of evolution. And so, in my mind, I'm like, you know, what, 60 years later, or so, you know, this comes along and disproves the hypothesis, disproves evolution. And did that stop him? No. Even though it was totally disproved, you know, they just say, and what they say, what the evolutionists say, they say, that was back then, you know, how did they say it? There was a clean, you know, a pristine environment, you know, for the development of life. And I think the exact opposite. So another side of this is life comes from life. And another thing is life comes from death. Everything we eat, almost everything we eat, if you look at your body, probably a very high percentage of what's in your body was living before, right? It was in some other, you know, all the molecules, you know, were in something else living, you know, whether it be a cow, a sheep, or a plant. So life comes from, you know, life. Not only does life come from life comes from death. And so we have all these nutrients in the ground. If you just have a quote pristine universe, nothing ever tampered with, you know, had the earth with nothing, you know, just popped with, you know, chemicals, it's further away than, in my mind, it's much further away than from supporting life or creating life than it would be today. And today, even in a lab, they cannot create life. They cannot put all the chemicals together they think that would produce life and hit it with some electricity or whatever, hit it with a lightning bolt or whatever, and they've never been able to do that. They've done some amazing things. Like they can create DNA. I'm impressed with that. You know, they can create DNA in a lab. They can't create life.
But they've already been doing that.
Pardon me?
They've already been doing that. They got the dire wolves that they're trying to bring back through the DNA of redoing for scientific. They brought these wolves back that were basically prehistoric ancestral by DNA.
Yeah, they mess with the DNA, but they're really just changing the DNA of existing wolves and changing them to make them, you know, in their mind, you know, make them have the attributes of what do you call these dire wolves?
Dire wolves. Yeah, it's a wolf.
Yeah, I mean, that's impressive. But, you know, and I would dare say, even if they do create life out of non-life, it really doesn't, you know, doesn't really prove anything because, you know, it's not happening in nature, right? It's not just happening in the middle of a desert somewhere. So even if they could do it in a lab, would that really do it? Not really. Not really. Anyway. The law of biogenesis, which I think is a very important law. Okay, so I guess this is what we just went over. Then God said, "Let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures, and let them fly above the earth of the heavens." And God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves. With the waters swarmed in their kind, and every winged bird according to their kind. And God saw that it was good. And you notice their kind. So there's of the birds according to their kind, and the animals. And this is the one in Genesis. So Noah, you know, gathered up everything by their kind. So that had two of every kind come in there. So life comes from life, and not only does life come from life, it comes from life of that kind, right? You know, you can, you know, like you can breed certain animals, and certain animals can change, but they never change kinds. I mean, like, so scientists, when they developed all this species, genus and species, we have to go back to the genus. So if you go back to the genus, there's no way that you can come up with a new version, but you can come up with new species.
I think something also interesting or important to note is when God is talking about kind, He's not talking from our terminology.
No.
Scientific taxonomy came way later, and so we have to think about it in the way God is using kind. And so, yeah, you might be able to crossbreed a tiger and a lion, right, to get a new breed of cat, but they're still a kind.
They're still a cat.
They're still a cat. You're not crossbreeding a dog and a cat.
Yeah, I mean,
and so even in all those things, you're not going across that kind
right.
barrier.
Yeah, there's always a genetic limit.
So we've never, there's not any record in the fossil record or even in the observable record today, any development of a new kind.
Yeah.
And that's really significant.
Yeah, all this, go ahead.
And as a matter of fact, even when they can find some crossbreeding going on, for example, the horse and the donkey, if they can crossbreed those, you end up with an animal that is sterile and in it itself is not able to breed. So you have reached the end of a kind at that point.
Yeah.
And kind of along that line, I think I'd heard, Chuck Miller talk about this a few years ago. He's one of the guys who do that kind of work, but mutation is not the answer for evolutionists. You may hear that term thrown around, but every time mutation occurs in the DNA, it's always a degradation.
Right.
It's never a progression. It's never an improvement over what was there before. Like you say, even when you crossbreed a donkey and a horse, you get a mule, but that mule is less genetically enhanced than it was prior.
Yeah.
And so there's always that
Yeah.
degradation that occurs. And then again, that's not a crossing of kinds. Those are still
Yeah.
in the same kind.
And yeah, I guess I'll make a note on that. Is male mules are always sterile, but on rare occasions, a female mule has given birth, but it's always, the outcome has always been either a donkey or a horse. It's the offspring of a mule, a female mule, if it occurs, but rarely, it'll either be a donkey or a horse. It will not be another mule. Kind of interesting little.
And that's a kind of pivotal law that science, in order for the evolutionists to get what they want, they have got to find a way to explain the creation of new DNA, unique new DNA, and they cannot. There's no explanation for that.
Yeah, I mean, everything seems to be bad. I mean, Down syndrome. I mean, that's something that some extra DNA, but it's bad, right? I mean, it's and not only would it have to improve it, it would have to improve it like every generation for millennia, according to their theory. Something would have to drive that. I mean, to me, and that would be design. So there has to be, we want to develop an eye. Well, according to their theory, I mean, that would have to develop over such a long period of time, and there's no benefit to 1% of an eye or 1,000th of an eye. It's worthless until it works. I mean, until it all works, right? I mean, it's.
And it would also be without any guiding hand over it.
Yeah. I mean,
Their idea of work. There's no designer in any of that. It's all by chance that it would be an improvement, and it defies logic.
and a cardiovascular system's even worse, because an eye. Okay, you could have a vestigial organ, an eye, develop. But cardiovascular system, without it, the organism is dead within a minute. So I mean, it's completely absurd from start to end. But the law of cause and effect, and I think this law is technically not a scientific law, but it's like a foundation. Actually, it's a foundational law to science. So it's kind of like, one of the foundations of science itself. So technically not a scientific law, but it sort of is, really. Okay, so it's a philosophical or logic law. It's used in science, but not considered a science law. But really, it's kind of a common sense. A lot of this stuff is just kind of common sense. Okay, so law of cause and effect, scientists use it to figure why things happen, teachers to explain consequences, detectives use it to solve mysteries, and the Bible and other teachings use it to show how actions leads to outcomes. So it's everywhere. Everything you do, your muscles lift up, when I lift this up, it's cause and effect. My muscles lift this up. Clicker thing. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a person sows, this will he also reap. what you plant is what you harvest, the effect, cause and effect. So it's in the Bible. From the way you judge, you will be judged, and by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. And here's another one. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So God, the cause, created the universe. The effect. And going back to that, all these atheist explanations are just totally inadequate at every level, at every single level. It's always just inadequate.
Before you go on to law of probability, and I think I'm right about this. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe foundational to that law is that the cause has to be greater than the effect, because the effect is always less than the cause. Right? So like just the distribution of energy, right? The energy or the force that expels the energy has to be bigger than the energy it expels. Like if you just take the two balls colliding together, and then the effect is how they would expel from one another, the force that brings them together has to be greater than the force of them parting from one another. And so, because with each parting, you think about where you have the balls that are bouncing into one another, each time there's a loss of energy in that contact. And so, when you think about the creation of the universe, that cause had to be greater than the effect, which is the universe that we see. And so I think that's another important element to that law.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can have triggers like, I don't know if you've ever seen that, like the films with the ping pong balls. Maybe think of this, the ping pong balls and the mouse traps, right? You see, you have this room filled with ping pong balls and mouse traps, and you throw one ping pong ball in there and it all just fires away. But before long, it's all quiet. It's just like the universe is going to be. If God would be willing to let it just exist forever, it would just all cool off and nothing going on. Law of probability. And this is what somebody came up with, the idea that one protein being estimated is 1 in 10 to the 74th. I mean, you start thinking the probability of these happening, right? It's like, what's the odds? Okay, you just like a major baseball, assuming teams are, relatively equal. No team's ever gone undefeated in Major League Baseball. Not even close, right? 162 games. And, maybe they can win 20 in a row, 30 in a row, even, I don't know what the record is, but it's, I remember a team going 35-5. That was the best I can remember, at the start of the year, but then they faded away. But even that's not undefeated. So in the same way, it's not, even for this stuff to add up, I mean, it'd have to be the ultimate winning streak. 74 zeros, it's probably more zeros than that, right? I mean, if you had a 10-sided dice and, evenly, and then rolled it 74 times on a 10-sided dice, you come up with a 7 all 74 times. You think, well, that's something, it's easy to say, oh yeah, that can happen. Really? I guess I work in computers, right? I'm a computer programmer, and it's really easy to write a computer program that you know would work. And, you know, like, it's mainly just exercises to, you know, to teach you programming. And, you know, you write this program and you know it's going to work, but, you know, you start doing the math and you're going, I'm going to die before this program ever finishes, so you just have to kill it, right? That's not going to work. And it's really easy, I mean, to happen that way. I mean, it's, if you look at, like an RSA key, I guess, I don't know if RSA keys are used every day. Or we do use AES, like unwittingly when you log on to a computer, you would actually use an AES key, and just to solve this with today's computers, to solve an AES 256 key, 256 bits, it'd be longer than the age of the Earth, just to solve it by a lot. And it's something we use every day. When you're on your browser, when you log on to a website in your browser, it's using an encryption key that would take you know centuries and centuries and centuries to solve. And it's not that hard to come up with either, right? You just add a bit, just like, you know, like the dice, right? You know, okay, I'm going to roll a 7. Okay, you can do that. How about 2 7s in a row? Okay, you can probably do that. 3 7s in a row. That's going to take you a while. That's be 1 in 1,000, right? You know, but just add them. Okay, 4. At some point, it basically gets impossible. I don't know what that, but you know what I'm saying, right? At some point, it's going to be like, you know, for me to do this, it's going to be the you know, whatever they say, 15 billion years. You know, it doesn't take that. It's not going to take that many rolls of the dice to roll a 7. Then you're up to, you know, what the atheists say is the age of the Earth, 15 billion years or whatever it is. It really doesn't. I mean, it's kind of interesting. And I guess where's randomness in the Bible? And they drew lots for them, and the lot fell on Matthias. So even in the Bible, and I always wondered, it got me thinking though, was that random? Did God just allow that to be random, or is that God's way of choosing? I guess I won't debate that, but it got me thinking. Okay, this one, the law of irreducible complexity. I guess we've kind of gone over some of this. The extension of the law of cause and effect. Many biology systems are irreducibly complex, meaning they only work when all parts are fully formed and functional. And to me, the big one, the cardiovascular system. There's no partial, you know, all of the parts of the human, of a cardiovascular system have to work. Don't have to work perfectly by any means. It certainly isn't in my case, but they all have to work to be functional, or you'll die. You'll just flat out die. You know, and even if you have an artificial heart, well, it's still, you're kind of cheating it, but you're still, you still have to have a functional, completely functional system. Psalms 139, verses 13 and 14. For you created my innermost parts, you wove me in my mother's womb. I will give you thanks to you because I am awesomely and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. Proverbs 20, verse 12. The hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord has made both of them. And we went over this, the law of genetic limits. With all the breeding and mutations, you're always just going to have a variation, or really within a genus, you can have variation and maybe even a new species, but never a new kind. And all that's arbitrary, like Brian was saying, that, and all of it's come along after, the Bible. So, that they can do what they want, right? I mean, they can. Genesis 1, 24 and 25. Then God said, let the earth produce living creatures according to their kind, livestock crawling and animals of the earth according to their kind. And it was so. God made the animals of the earth according to their kind, and livestock according to their kind, and everything that crawls on the ground according to its kind. So there's a genetic limits. Oh, so I got to overtime. So this is like what I had in case I ran out of stuff. And these are just some creation scriptures. Job 38, 1-7. Then the Lord answered Job with a whirlwind and said, Who is this who darkens the divine plan by words without knowledge? And I guess, would someone like to lead a prayer? I'll lead a prayer. Our dear Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this beautiful day, and we thank you so much for the creation and the natural laws that you put in place, Father. And Father, we especially thank you for the guidance that we find in your word, Father, that helps us to live for this is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. So I guess we can go through the rest of these. You can go ahead. I guess we can break now. I got to my goal.